As a gamer, sometimes I can be a little bit greedy. There's been a ton of good games released this year, plenty of RPGs, plenty in other genres that I enjoy as well. I'm still going through a lot of them. I haven't finished them all, and like everyone else, I've got a massive backlog of titles I'm still getting to. Despite all of that, I just can't help thinking about the next thing. What's the next big game coming out that I'm looking forward to? And I am starting to think about CD Projekt Red, and there is an article here that does talk about Cyberpunk 2077's redemption being complete, but the future remaining quite murky for CD Projekt Red. And I've been thinking about that myself because I've been playing through Cyberpunk Phantom Liberty. I've been enjoying 2.0. I started a brand new playthrough, and it's the first time I've played it in about 3 years. So I played it at launch. I had an okay time with it, despite some of the rough edges, the glitches, a bit of that jank. But it's obviously very smooth now. It's feeling like a very polished game from a massive studio, and I do like it. I don't think polish automatically means a game is good. I'm thinking about the story, the characters, the choices in a role-playing game like this, and overall it's pretty good. I do think this time I actually played the main story from start to finish without really jumping off into side quests. I wanted to start a new playthrough, experience most of the game again before getting into Phantom Liberty. So playing that main story, it's decent. Obviously, Keanu's cool, and there's some decent moments throughout, but I do think the overall story is weaker than, say, Witcher 3. It's a bit of fun, but I guess going through it again, I've seen some of the pros, some of the cons, and again, it is obviously a very well-polished game, and the actual gameplay itself, it's probably better than Witcher 3. I do find that Witcher 3's sort of sword combat is pretty fun, pretty action-focused, pretty okay. But in Cyberpunk, you can obviously do a lot more. You've got all of your arsenal in terms of guns, melee combat. You can approach situations differently, stealth, you can hack. Lots of different ways to actually engage with the game, and that's not even getting into the level design, the exploration, which is a lot stronger in Cyberpunk, because you've got buildings. It has that Deus Ex vibe about it. I've always thought that Cyberpunk was almost a Deus Ex light in an open world, and I was impressed by that. Even when it came out, I thought, this has sort of slipped under the radar. People are talking about how it doesn't have all the life sim elements. It's not like a GTA clone. By the way, I think the police system that they introduced, I don't know about you, but I actually just find it a little bit annoying. It's cool, it's well made, but anytime the police are after me, I'm just completely frustrated. I want to get to the next quest. I do not care about a 5-star wanted level. If I want that, I'll go back and play GTA San Andreas and muck around. I'm here for the RPG, less about the police system. But all of that aside, I am thinking now about what CD Projekt are doing next, and this article does a pretty good job of breaking down what's coming up for CD Projekt. I've seen a little bit of it before. I know they're working on, say, a Cyberpunk sequel, a new Witcher, but they do actually have quite a bit in the works. And the article does mention this challenge that CD Projekt Red have, which is the Witcher franchise is basically done. The Witcher 3 obviously is where it peaked in popularity, which must have come as a bit of a shock for CD Projekt Red, because where it gets a little bit tricky is Geralt is the face of The Witcher, and his story is over. Witcher 3, it closed things out nicely for him. There was obviously the TV show, and Geralt was the face of that, regardless of what the producers, the creators of that show tried to do. Everyone just thinks about Geralt. You think of Witcher, you do think of Geralt. And there might be other characters like Ciri, Dandelion, was that another one? I'm grasping at straws to think of them, because all I think about when I think Witcher is Geralt. And so they're starting from scratch, and you've got this project Polaris. So all of these games they've got in development, they're so early on that they've only got code names. We've had no real official presentations, official announcements. It's just the studio letting us know, hey, we are developing games, please stay hyped, because eventually we're going to have something new. And Polaris, that is the full Witcher sequel from the original studio, Witcher studio. Now, I'm a little bit murky on the details. Obviously, Cyberpunk is made by the main studio as well, but I'm not sure if maybe things have split out a little bit. But the short of it is a Witcher sequel from the A team at CD Projekt Red, which is coming. And they have spoken previously about this being a new trilogy of games. And I guess my concern there is when you announce a trilogy, I start thinking you've done that because it's all about the coffers. It's very much a money-driven decision, that you've got a successful IP and you truly want to milk it, because creatively, a trilogy is a big deal and it's rare that you get it right. I guess the Mass Effect trilogy, they did a pretty good job there of having a cohesive story planned out, 1, 2, and 3. But then, of course, the wheels fell off with Andromeda, and CD Projekt Red are in that same place. They've had 3 games, all of them various degrees of success, but it was a very linear scale going upwards, you could say, where 1 did all right, 2 more mainstream, 3 an absolute juggernaut. It led to the hype, I should say, of Cyberpunk. So things were going very well for them, but releasing a brand new game where you don't have Geralt, you may have some of those supporting characters, but they're not really household names in the same way. You're going to have a new hero, I think. I think if you just throw a supporting character like Ciri into the main role, there's no way it's going to be as successful, because people already were familiar with that character, yet they're not as hyped for them as much as they were Geralt. So I think you do have to really just take that risk. Brand new character, hope that you can differentiate it from Geralt and make it its own thing. So that's their only hope there. Project Orion, so that is the sequel to Cyberpunk, and it's by the new Boston and Vancouver studios. That to me is a bit concerning because they're brand new studios, and I think that they're having to make the harder game. They've got the bigger challenge, because making a sword and sorcery era series like The Witcher, I do think making a game in a current or future setting is way more difficult, because when you explore Night City, things have to be happening everywhere. There's a city with advertisement, lights, people walking around, there's police rushing around, gunshots firing, everything's happening, vehicles, cars in the air, flying, all of it's going on. Whereas in Sword and Sorcery, it's the same old stuff. You might have someone going for a ride on their horse, you might have your generic sort of villagers, NPCs on a basic schedule going to work. That's about it, but it is nothing compared to a Night City where it all has to be happening. It's the place to be. So I do think that this new studio has their work cut out for them. If they're developing a brand new city from scratch, that could be tough. If they're reusing the current Night City and kind of upgrading it, the challenge there is it's going to be difficult to generate hype in the same way. I mean, Tears of the Kingdom, Zelda, that did really well, but I do think that despite the redemption arc of 2.0, they are still going to have their work cut out for them, because the hype's not going to be there in the same way. I honestly don't think, or at least it's very unlikely, that CD Projekt Red will ever generate that much interest again. That's not to say that's a terrible thing. I honestly don't think that the hype was ever really justified or made sense for a role-playing game. You just don't see it. Skyrim's probably the only other game I can think of that had that same level of interest and really had everyone excited going in, not just gamers, but almost the mainstream. I think that's normally reserved for something like a Grand Theft Auto that is super accessible from everyone. And of course, CD Projekt Red tried to market Cyberpunk like it was a GTA, which obviously wasn't the case. I think that was lightning in a bottle. It won't happen like that again. I think that's a good thing, even for CD Projekt Red. They bit off more than they can chew. If they concentrate on just delivering and telling us about RPGs they're making, I think they'll get the audience that makes sense for the game, and they'll probably be better for it, because I think so many people who picked up Cyberpunk, they weren't really RPG players. They were just people who expected this to be a life sim, dancing, going bowling with your friends. You are not necessarily just doing quests and missions. You are actually living in Night City, and you can buy any apartment. You can drive absolutely any car. It can all be yours. This is your new virtual reality. When it wasn't that, a lot of people were left disappointed. And I don't think that any studio really, certainly not CD Projekt Red, they are not going to be able to deliver a game of that sort of ambition. And they don't need to. I want them to keep making RPGs. Sure, don't release an absolutely broken Xbox One PS4 version again. That's what really killed them, I think. But if they can release role-playing games, that Deus Ex 5 and a Cyberpunk 2, I'll be happy. There is a small spin-off project. CD Projekt Red bought a studio, and it's a survival studio, apparently. If there was anyone here that I just didn't care about, it's probably this one. Whatever the spin-off is, maybe it ends up being a mobile game or something like that, who knows. But I don't think that's going to be a big attraction. I think the other ones we've just spoken about will be bigger. And this live-action project, I never watched that TV show or anime or whatever it was. I remember it got a pretty good reception. That was also in a time where the game, in terms of hype, wasn't really there. People had played it at release, they felt it was a letdown, and despite all of that, this TV show comes out and people thought it was pretty good. So maybe that's good for them. If people are interested in it, it seems to build interest. So sure, go and do that. It's not taking away from the games, it seems, so I'm fine with it. The remake of the first Witcher, kind of interesting. Probably the best way for them to bring Geralt back and keep that, I suppose, familiar feeling with the franchise. So they can remake The Witcher 1, and I think that would lead to a Witcher 2 remake in the same style if it's successful too. Hopefully it does keep some of The Witcher 1. I think it's a nice game. Hopefully they don't sort of throw out everything. But I would guess that this is basically going to be The Witcher 3 Witcher 1 edition, basically a reskin, and they're just going to play it safe there. It would make the most sense. They can't have too many risky projects going on, and that just seems like a win. If they can bring Geralt back and it's a story that's tried and proven, it's not absolutely breaking the end of Witcher 3 and stuffing things up with maybe a spin-off, that's okay with me. So we'll see how that one goes. Their new IP, that to me is quite interesting though. Given that The Witcher, you've got the fantasy, and then you've got Night City, Cyberpunk, that futuristic feel, I'm not sure what this could be. I mean, you would assume it's going to be another role-playing game. They've branched out with things like the Gwent spin-off, which didn't actually do very well, I believe. So I assume it's going to not be something like that. It is going to be a genuine gameplay-focused action game of some sort. And what could it be? Could it be post-apocalyptic? Could it be something entirely different? They've obviously worked on the first-person shooter elements of Cyberpunk. Maybe they could make an FPS or something totally different in that vein. That's probably interesting. If I had to rank my interest in these different games, I'm probably most interested in the Cyberpunk sequel, just because I think that they've sort of brushed off all of the issues of the original, and if they can make something else in that vein of a Deus Ex again, I'm all for it. I love that gameplay aspect. The Witcher stuff, given that Geralt story's over, a new trilogy, sure, it might be cool in the gameplay department, but ever since The Witcher 3, even with Cyberpunk, I don't think they've matched those really awesome story moments, and that's what really pulled me into The Witcher, was those really great quests, like the Bloody Baron. That's what sticks with me more than just the sort of moment-to-moment gameplay. So I'm sure a new Witcher will be decent to some degree. I do think that CD Projekt Red care about their reputation, so whatever it is, I don't think it's going to suddenly have microtransactions. They very closely were at that line where they were going to make the Cyberpunk multiplayer game, and then they stopped all of that after the bad reception of the single-player portion, and they've pivoted back to being a studio for gamers, apparently. Maybe that won't last forever, but I do think for now they're going to focus on their reputation. So at worst, The Witcher, I think, will be middling. Won't be as good as 3 because of the lack of a really great story and characters, but we'll see. I think they'll give it their best shot. So ranking them, Cyberpunk at the top, Cyberpunk 2, then probably the new Witcher game, followed by the new IP. I think that new IP could be interesting, something different. Then the Witcher 1 remake. I've enjoyed the original, I can always go back to it, but a fresh coat of paint could be decent. And then the other stuff I won't even name. TV show, some sort of spin-off project that's maybe tiny. We'll see. If it's an RPG, I might revisit. It could be interesting. Smaller scale, maybe a harder core sort of RPG. Could be more in line with a Baldur's Gate 3. If that's the case, suddenly my ears will perk up. So I'll keep an eye on it. But they've got a fair bit in the works. They went from a one-game studio, basically, to having a whole empire of different games going on. They've got to deliver, though. Their last game didn't really do what they wanted. They've revamped it. They've had that redemption arc. So now they have to focus on that next phase. They've got tons of projects. They've got to start releasing them. You don't want them to be like, say, Xbox, Microsoft, where they've got a million studios, but never seem to have something coming out. And if it does come out, it's a Redfall or it's Starfield, where it underwhelms to some degree. So they've got their work cut out for them. No one's going to give them a free pass. Cyberpunk did some damage. Redeeming themselves is great, but people are always going to remember when they slipped, when they fell on their face. Looking forward to seeing what happens, but we probably got a while to wait, and hopefully we get some good stuff in the meantime. So thanks so much for listening. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers. Bye.